I'm Kimberly from Fat Quarter Shop, and welcome to another episode of Classic and Vintage, where we take a vintage block and make it modern for today. Today's block is called St. Gregory's Cross, and here's the original pattern from the Kansas City Star newspaper from 1933. And it says, a pattern for the Lenten needleworkers. I don't even know what that means, but we're gonna make it anyway. And you can see back then we used to use templates. But today we're going to use modern supplies. We're going to be using the Creative Grids 6.5-inch ruler and Aurifil floss. This block uses the hole punch dot by Ruby Star Society. It's a brand new collection. It's an elevated dot and it comes in a great assortment of colors. Now our block pattern is completely free, and if you want a paid pattern to turn it into a quilt, we've got 4 sizes available online at Fat Quarter Shop. Make sure to subscribe to our channel, click the bell to be notified, and let's sew this vintage block. This block is assembled using 3 different units. So this will be our first unit. It's going to consist of a fabric E square, 2 fabric B squares, and 2 fabric D squares. On the wrong side of the fabric B and the fabric D, you're going to draw a line from corner to corner. I like to use the friction pen because it disappears with heat later. We're going to use this line to sew on. So I'm going to draw these lines first. Now from here we're going to make one of these units. Now in the block you're going to need to make 4, but I'm going to show you how to make one. First you're going to take your fabric Bs, which are your pink, and there's 2 ways to do this. You can either pin in place. I'm going to show you both ways. And if you pin, I would pin on both sides. This is going to be biased when you sew. When you pin, you want to make sure you can't see the pink from the back or the white from the front. Another thing you can use, because you're going to be cutting this off, is you can use seam-align glue and just put a few dots on the section where you're going to cut away, and then let this sit for a little bit, and then you don't have to use pins, and we're going to cut that away so it won't matter. So you can try either one of those methods, see which one works best for you. Then you will get an open toe foot or a foot that's open, and you're just going to stitch where you can see the line. You're going to stitch directly on that line. We're using Aurifil color 2024, and once you do it, it's going to look just like this. So you want to make sure you're right on that line. If you sew too far to the left of the line, this will be too short. If you sew too far to the right, you will have an overlap. Now from here I'm going to cut a 1/4 inch away. I'm using this Creative Grids ruler. It's only 1.5 by 6.5 and it fits this size nicely. And then I'm going to show you how to press these seams open. So before I press any seams, I always set my seams flat. That just means put the iron right on the seam and not jiggling your iron. Then I'm going to press to one side. Then I'm going to let that sit just a tiny bit, and then I'm going to press it open so I don't burn my fingers, and I'll just run the tip of my iron right on that seam. And just let your iron sit a tad. And then while it's still hot, you can put a clapper on top of it while you piece the rest of your units, and the heat from the iron will absorb into the wood and your seams will lie flatter. Once this is done, you're going to take your fabric D squares and put them on the remaining corners, and again you will either pin or use glue. Stitch on the lines, and this will be how your unit looks. And again, you're going to trim a 1/4 inch away and press. So you're going to need 4 of these. When your block is done, when you put a 6.5-inch square ruler, your block should be about this size. You want to make sure you don't have any pieces coming off the edge, that it's not too big. And the way that we got these units really nice is we stitched directly on the line and we pressed open really carefully. So just take your time doing these units, and you're going to make 4 of these. Now we're going to move to the second unit for our St. Gregory's Cross. We're going to be using our fabric C rectangles and our fabric G squares, and we're going to be using those same techniques before, where you sew right on the line and you trim and you press, but this time you're going to press according to your pattern. So on your left unit, you're going to place a fabric G square on the top of a fabric C rectangle, and your line is going to go this direction. That's going to be your left unit. And then you're going to make the right unit, and your line is going to go the opposite direction. You're going to stitch directly on that line and trim according to the pattern. Once that's done, you will do your next unit and face them this direction. And again, you can use pins or you can use the seam align glue. And your units will look just like this, and you can see that's making a star point. From here, because of the way that we pressed, our seams will nest, so you will put them right sides together. And here I would use pins. And your seam will nest. It will just lock into place, and you'll pin right at the end, pin right at this intersection, and pin here. And then this time you're going to use a 1/4 inch foot, and you're going to stitch with a 1/4 inch seam and press open. And this is how your units will look. You can see the front, the back, you can see the thread just blends in with the fabric. And again, you can put a Creative Grid 6.5 inch ruler just to make sure that it's not bigger. Now, if it's slightly smaller, that's totally fine. You just don't want your unit to be bigger. You're going to make 4 of these star point units. Our last step is to make 1 hourglass unit. We're going to use our fabric A and fabric F squares. And you can cut these separately or together. And I'm going to do it together because we made our units slightly bigger, and you're going to trim down after. So what you will do is just take a ruler that's long enough, cut from point to point, and then cut the opposite way. And then what you're going to do is we're going to take 2 of each one and set them aside. And here we're going to make an hourglass. And with this white fabric, just make sure you've got the right side facing up. And all of these seams right here are all bias, meaning they're very stretchy. So what I would do here is put these right sides together. I would pin 3 times on each so that when you're sewing, it doesn't shift. You're going to sew these seams with a 1/4 inch seam and press toward the dark, and then you're going to have 2 units. From here, you will put them right sides together, and you can slide your unit so it locks, pin in place, and I would pin each end and once in the center, and you're going to sew this with a 1/4 inch seam, and then you're going to press that to one side. Now, we wrote these instructions so that this hourglass unit would be slightly larger and we could trim down to get an accurate result. Because you have so many bias seams, it just works better that way. So I'm going to take a Creative Grids 6.5 inch ruler, and in the center of the ruler is a white dot. So you'll put that white dot right on the center where all the pink and the whites join. You will have this line on this seam, and you want this to match your point and that to match your point. So you want the corner of your ruler to hit the white and the pink area. I'm going to cut 2 sides at once. Use a rotating mat so that my ruler and fabric don't move. And we have hardly wasted any fabric. And our hourglass is exactly 6.5 inches square. And you're going to make 1 of these for the block. Now all we have to do is put the block together. You're going to set your hourglass block with your pinks on the outside. All 4 of these pinks will touch the inside. You will see that you get a nice light pink star point on the outside. Now the key to getting this block really nice is to pin. So you will pin this together, and when you pin here, you will want to look to make sure the peach right there lines up with the pink and just hits the other pink. And you will see that that seam lines up. So you just want to be really careful where you're pinning all the way through. First, you're going to sew these together. Once those are together, you'll press according to the pattern and add these. Then you will put it all together for a really nice block, and I'll show you what that block looks like pieced. So this is how your block looks pieced, and you can see that all of our intersections are nice and not chopped off. The one tip I would give you is this is an intermediate block. If you are an intermediate sewer, press according to our pattern. You're going to have some seams that are open and some seams that are to one side. Now, if you're a more advanced quilter, you can try to make this block with all your seams open and see which one you like better. We hope you loved making the St. Gregory's cross today, and if you love this fabric, which is called hole punch dot, it would also look good in another free pattern we have that's called Starry Charm Shortcut Quilt. So you want to check that video out and subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'll see you next time.